I find it really hard to believe that it's been 11 years since Disney Infinity 1.0 came out.
I'm so old now.
Except on the Wii U eShop it's been 10 years, but that's besides the point. Today I wanted to discuss the 6 playset games that were available for the first Disney Infinity, as well as the 29 individual characters you could get. So this video will be broken up into 2 sections. We'll have the playsets along with the characters you could get to use within the playsets, and then a special section for the characters who did not have their own playsets. So just for reference, I've been playing this on my PC, so this is the Disney Infinity 1.0 Gold Edition that came out on Steam in 2016. This meant I could buy the game and then not have to buy any of the figures, the base, the discs, anything like that. I could just play the game and switch characters whenever I wanted to. Now, before we go any further, now is your chance to subscribe. If you enjoy Disney content, old games, nostalgia, this is the perfect channel for you, so please hit that subscribe button as well as the bell for notifications. And we shall move on with the video. So first of all, I just want to give a quick shout out to the tutorial in this game. The intro and the tutorial are gorgeous, I have to say. Graphically, it looks amazing and it just sets the tone for the game really well. You start off as just this spark in space to create imagination, to build the world. And it's just such a cool little intro to the game. It takes you through some of the worlds, you meet some of the characters. It's just a really cool introduction to Disney Infinity as a whole. And it's the perfect length as well, because I was playing this and I thought, God, I hope this doesn't end really soon. It doesn't overstay its welcome. It's just the perfect length for an introduction tutorial to a video game. So I gotta hand it to Avalanche, well done. Okay, so first up I decided I was going to play the Incredibles playset. The Incredibles got representation from 5 different characters that were made into figures. We have Mr. Incredible, Mrs. Incredible, Violet, Dash, and Syndrome. Now, I really like how all 5 of these figures look in real life. They are all pretty cool and pretty nice to have on display. There is also a crystal version of Mr. Incredible that you could get, which was quite cool, but personally I wasn't so keen on the crystal releases. They should have done some rare reskins like Mr. Incredible's blue and black costume instead. That could have been cool. Anyway, this playset seems to be in an alternate timeline to the events seen in the actual Incredibles film, because obviously Syndrome dies at the end. So in this timeline, Syndrome rises up again to take over Metroville. Now, a little fun fact for you, it seems originally the story was going to feature the Underminer, as with the end of the first Incredibles, as he was in early concept art for Disney Infinity, but he was scrapped, most likely to include Syndrome as a playable character who's way more popular, which makes Disney more money. I had the Syndrome figure when I was a kid and he was one of my favourite characters to play as in the game. He's just very cool. Now, for the most part, in the Incredibles playset, gameplay consists of 3 different things: fighting Omnidroids, saving civilians, and putting out fires. That's pretty much it. There is a bit more to it than that, but for the most part your missions will consist of these things. Now, traversing around the world starts off quite slow. You first get Mr. Incredible's car after you complete the first section. Eventually you'll unlock other ways of traversal, like helicopters, gliders. If you have Dash, you can get his super speed. It's all pretty cool, I have to say. It's just a shame it starts off feeling slow. Every character in this game feels like they run quite slowly, I'm not gonna lie. And that's the same across the board, not just in the Incredibles. Now, scattered throughout the world are a bunch of collectibles, and you know me, I love collectibles in my video games, so this was right up my street. There are capsules around that have items in that you can use in the toy box mode, which is essentially a giant sandbox, which we'll get to later. There are coins to collect to buy things within the world. There are chests that are scattered around that can only be opened by certain characters, so at the time, if you didn't have all the characters purchased, you could not 100% open everything in the game. As well as these chests, there are also missions exclusive to each of the characters, such as running with Dash and stuff like that, but you do have to have all the characters to be able to 100% each playset. However, if you're playing the Gold Edition on Steam like I am, that's not a problem at all because you can just switch out whenever you want. Anyway, the level design here is pretty good. I love how they've translated Metroville into the game. It looks really nice. Considering this game launched in 2013, graphically, I love the colours, it looks great. I'm not so fond of some of the character models. I think Mr. Incredible looks a bit clunky. Some of them do look a bit strange in this game, but the world around them does look fantastic. Anyway, that pretty much takes me to the end of the Incredibles playset. If I had to sum it up, I'd say the figures are great, the character choice is pretty good, it's a shame there's no Frozone, I have to say. The level and world design are great, it's just a shame the missions are a bit repetitive, but you're probably going to hear me say that a lot throughout this video, so that's going to get repetitive as well. Okay, so next up we have Monsters University, and I emphasize this is Monsters University, not Monsters Inc. Now initially when I went into this I thought, oh really, Monsters University, not Inc. But when you actually play it, it's pretty good, I'm not gonna lie. In fact, out of the original 6 playsets, I'd say this is definitely one of the better ones. Anyway, Monsters University gets represented by 3 different figures that you could buy. Sully obviously came with the base game, and then you could get Mike and Randy, or Randall if you're a Monsters Inc. fan. And to be honest, the figures are alright, the Mike and Randy ones are pretty good. I found the Sully one to be really poorly made when I got it with the base set. In fact, it broke quite easily, I remember having to super glue it back to the base, but they all look nice. Now, much like the Monsters University film, the main consensus of the Monsters University playset is an American college campus frat kind of experience. The Monsters University students come up against the FearTech campus students in an intense battle that consists of pranks, vandalism, some kidnapping as well, standard Disney stuff really. Anyway, whilst there is combat like there is of course in the Incredibles playset, this game does have a bit more emphasis on exploration, platforming, and some stealth as well, because you have to sneak up on the FearTech students to scare them. Now again, I have to say the movement just feels so slow at first, and it takes a while before you get any other way of traversal. You are just stuck walking until a good hour in when you unlock the beastly bicycle. And I have to say, travelling around on the beastly bicycle is a lot of fun. There's a very simple trick system, you can grind on ledges, there's ramps you can go up, you get boosts from pulling off tricks. It's actually pretty cool, I'm not gonna lie. I spent way more time doing that than doing anything else in the whole playset. This playset also introduces the toilet paper launcher and a paintball gun, and I have to say one thing I wasn't too keen on, and I think this is across the board in the whole of Disney Infinity, is the locking on system and aiming is a little bit janky. I found it a bit hit or miss really, and it was more miss than hit, especially the toilet paper launcher, but this didn't really affect my enjoyment too much, it was just a little bit irritating. Anyway, the Monsters University playset is broken up into 3 main areas as well as the Scream tunnels. You've got Monsters University, FearTech, and Frat Row. And I have to say, they all look pretty good. They all capture the vibe of the film and the overall campus of a college quite well. It's all very colourful, all very bright. You're going to hear me saying this a lot. The design of the NPCs in the world is pretty good, they all fit in with the world. I found the Incredibles ones to look a little bit jarring in comparison to the main characters, but the monsters all kind of fit in together, which is nice. Again, there are a wide variety of collectibles here, red capsules, green capsules, there's the character specific chests, there are flags for each campus you have to collect, and what I forgot to mention about the Incredibles is that each playset has a big vault that can only be unlocked when you have met all the specific character requirements. So in Monsters University, you have to unlock it with Sully, Mike, and Randy. And in return, I got a whole Monsters University world to use in the toy box, which is pretty cool, but I don't really care that much, I'm not gonna lie. There were a few things in this playset that did really make me chuckle. Early on in the game, they get you to test sneaking up on robots and scaring them instead of students, and the robots all let out a very familiar scream. And then later on down the line, Randy is an NPC that gives you missions, but you can also receive those missions whilst playing as Randy. It's a bit confusing, I have to say. Anyway, overall this playset is actually a pretty fun time. It's quite varied, it's colourful, traversing around on the bike is a lot of fun. Overall, I would recommend playing this playset if you do have Disney Infinity. Okay, so with Monsters University now out of the way, I decided to move on to Pirates of the Caribbean. The 2 worlds I've played in so far have both been from animated films, so I was a bit curious to see how a live action film would translate into a game with animated characters as well. And the answer is, it kind of works, I guess. Captain Jack and his band of pirates all look quite colourful and cartoony, but the world around them just does not. The ships all look quite realistic. The islands and towns you visit all look quite realistic too. It's a bit of a weird mix of real looking and cartoony. But I suppose to make these characters work within the rest of the game, they kind of had to do something like that, so it makes sense. Anyway, this game starts off with a pretty cool set piece of Jack rowing away while stuff is blowing up around him. And honestly, that set quite a high bar for me. I was like, oh, this could be really cool. I'm not the biggest fan of the films, but I could see how this could be fun. I love Sea of Thieves. This could be cool. No. It's just average. But anyway, the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise is represented by 3 different figures. You have Captain Jack, Barbossa, and Davy Jones. Now, I do think they could have represented this a little bit more, maybe with just one more figure, or by swapping out one of the 2 villains and giving us either Will or Elizabeth, but hey-ho, that's just me. I suppose not that long before Disney Infinity came out, we had Pirates of the Caribbean 4 on Stranger Tides, which didn't have Orlando Bloom or Keira Knightley, so I guess it makes sense that their characters weren't in the game. Anyway, on the ground, Jack has combat with a sword and a flintlock pistol. The flintlock pistol suffers from the same issues as the launcher did in Monsters University. The locking on is terrible, when it does land it's cool, but otherwise, The sword fighting is just standard button mash combat, there's nothing really too exciting to it, and as with all the worlds, you can block as well. Anyway, the story sees you racing against Davy Jones to find some kind of treasure, and I do find it fascinating that, once again, Davy Jones is an NPC in this game, but you can also play as him at the same time. The Incredibles had it with Syndrome, Monsters had it with Randy, and this has it with Davy Jones. Very odd choice. Now, I was hoping for a big, exciting adventure on the open seas to be able to sail my own ship, which is kind of there. You can sail your boat, and it is cool. It's very simple, don't get me wrong, very basic ship combat, very basic ship maneuvering. However, I know I've complained about the speed of which you move around in all of the playsets so far, but my god, it's the most obnoxious it's been yet here. Movement just takes forever. Jack doesn't feel any slower than any of the other characters in other games that I've played as, but when you have to row your little boat around, my god, the game just comes to a halt and it takes so long to get to places. Sailing at first on your big pirate ship is a bit slow, it's not terrible, and you can upgrade it, but the little rowboat is just so unnecessarily slow and it really brings the game down to a halt for me. In terms of gameplay, you are essentially sailing and performing ship combat, or you'll be on land hunting treasure and fighting other pirates. It is pretty cool, but it just is very watered down, sorry for my pun, watered down for kids. You still have the collectathon side of things here with the red and green capsules, treasure chests unlocked by certain characters, the vault to get your playset. It's all still here and it's in every level. Overall, I think I preferred this to the Incredibles level, but I definitely preferred Monsters University. Okay, so next up is probably the one that most of you have been waiting for, and this is the Cars playset. So first of all, Cars is represented by 4 different figures. You've got Lightning McQueen and Mater, and then you have Holly Shiftwell and Francesco Bernoulli, the absolute pinnacle of Italian villains in any film. So this is the first playset that we're playing that did not come included with the base Disney Infinity set. So you had to buy this playset, and the playset itself came with Lightning and Holly, and then you could buy Mater and Francesco separately. Now, the figures themselves all look pretty nice, and I have to say it did take me a minute to get used to how the cars looked within the actual game. As I started playing, I thought, oh yep, I'm definitely going to start writing about how ugly this looks, and then I kind of got used to it, and they just look like glorified Hot Wheels versions of themselves, and that's completely fine. Now, Avalanche previously had experience working with the Cars franchise with the Cars 2 video game, which in my opinion at least was pretty good. So quite a few of the mechanics from that game make a comeback here, like the drifting, building up the boost, you can do the in-air tricks, stuff like that. If you played Cars 2, you'll be kind of at home here. Except this is significantly easier, like a lot easier than anything in that game. Now, as well as your 4 playable characters, here are some of the other characters that you will encounter during your adventure. Finn McMissile, Luigi, Fillmore, Ramon, Flo, Guido, the King, Shu Todoroki, Carlo Veloso, and of course there are the tractors. And no Cars anything would be complete without our boy, Chick Hicks. Oh, it's been a while since I've been able to do that. So, interestingly enough, Sarge was actually meant to appear in the game. In early concept art, he is there, but it appears he was scrapped and replaced with, presumably, Finn McMissile, which would make sense considering he's parked at Sarge's hut. Anyway, the driving in this game actually feels alright. The physics work pretty well, drifting feels really nice, and most importantly, this playset does not feel slow, which it shouldn't because it's a Cars playset. However, it does not take long before you unlock turbo boosting as well, and you can get that upgraded. Most of your time in the Cars playset will be spent racing, but there are other missions like finding characters, clearing debris, rounding up tractors, and towing other vehicles. It's all fairly standard Cars stuff that we have seen before, but in the context of Disney Infinity it is slightly different and it works pretty well, I have to say. Now again, it does get quite repetitive, but As someone who is a fan of the Cars series, I did really enjoy this playset and I definitely will be going back to play some more. Radiator Springs looks pretty good in this game, I have to say. I think it has been built and looked better in previous early Cars THQ games, but I think here it does work very well, and the building customization, as with all the other levels, is very cool. Some of the combat from the Cars 2 game does actually come across here, as there are a couple of machine gun and missile challenges, although this is the only level that doesn't have any actual enemies to shoot, so I guess they didn't want to double down on the car murdering they'd done in the previous game. Once again, you have all your standard collectibles, you have the chests, you have the vault, but to be honest, I think I enjoyed collecting them more in this level than any other because it just really took me back to playing the original Cars games when I was a kid. You know, going around, collecting all the lightning bolts and all that. It just really took me back and it was quite a good time. Now, personally, I do think the two other character choices outside of Lightning and Mater for this set were a bit, Obviously, Cars 2 had come out fairly recently when Disney Infinity came out, so it makes sense to put Holly and Francesco there, but, you know, Finn McMissile was the goated character from that film. Like, we didn't need Holly, we didn't need Francesco, and then you could have used the Francesco slot for Chick Hicks, and then everyone would be happy, because he's in the game anyway. So, anyway, that's my mini Cars rant over. Good playset overall, definitely up there with the best ones in Disney Infinity. Moving on. Okay, so for our 5th playset, we have the Lone Ranger. Now, loads of you are probably looking at me like, huh? But let me tell you, the Lone Ranger was a 2013 Disney live-action film, directed by Gore Verbinski, who was the director of the original 3 Pirates of the Caribbean films. The film starred Armie Hammer as the titular Ranger and Johnny Depp as Tonto. There was a lot of controversy at the time about Johnny Depp playing a Native American, but here we are, it got a Disney Infinity set anyway. The film pretty much flopped, it didn't review very well, and pretty much is just forgotten now. Anyway, so the Lone Ranger playset only comes with 2 figures, and that is the Lone Ranger himself and Tonto. There weren't really any other characters in the film that you could have made a figure out of, maybe the villain Butch Cavendish, but other than that, there isn't really anyone. Now, given the theme of the film and the setting, this playset is much more combat based, and it does introduce something quite cool, called ricochet combat, so the Lone Ranger or Tonto can shoot or fire at something and it will bounce off and then potentially hit an enemy or something else. It does allow you to pull off some quite creative shots, which I think is pretty cool. It's just a shame that other than that, the combat is very unvaried, much like all the other sets. So the story takes place in the town of Colby, where you are defending it against Butch Cavendish and his gang. Much like the film, there's a heavy emphasis on steam locomotives, so there's a train that goes around the town that you can customize to have commodities like lumber, water, you can put Gatling guns and cannons on it, TNT. You use that to help defend the town, and in the end, the story takes you to an abandoned silver mine in the mountains where you face off with the Cavendish gang. Now, the map isn't huge, but it's big enough that you require a horse to move around quite quickly, because I found, again, movement is very slow. Thankfully, you do get a horse pretty much after you complete the tutorial segment of the world, so movement is quite fun. You can shoot whilst on horseback, you can run into things, you can still double jump on a horse, which means you can hit some pretty high heights from just moving quite quickly. And whilst I've mentioned the tutorial segments, I'm really starting to get fed up with them by now. On every single playset you go through the same tutorial. And you know what? I get it on the playsets that come with the base game. That kind of makes sense, but you'd think there'd be something set up to say if you've done it once, in the code goes, no, we don't need to show them this tutorial again. But even on the 3 additional playsets that you can purchase as well as the game, it still shows you how to accept missions, how to follow missions, how to equip items. And it's just annoying because you can't skip it. No, you could argue it doesn't take up that much time, but it's the same voice lines every time, telling me something I've already done 4 times previously by now. Anyway, overall, the world design's pretty cool. If you like westerns, you'll probably enjoy this level. If you don't like westerns, this isn't going to be for you. As a kid, this was essentially just playing a really, really watered-down version of Red Dead Redemption for children. So, I mean, it was kind of cool. I didn't dislike the film when it came out because I was only 12 or 13. In hindsight, it's probably not that good, hence the box office bomb and poor reviews. But this is a pretty cool niche part of Disney's history that gets to live on within Disney Infinity, whether they like it or not. So for our final set, we have Toy Story in Space. This is the final of the 6 original Disney Infinity 1.0 sets, and actually wasn't released with the game at launch, it was released in October that year. Now, obviously the idea for Disney Infinity came from the toy box mode of the Toy Story 3 game that Avalanche developed, so there were pretty high hopes for this one to be quite good, and, well, you'll get my opinion on that in a little bit. Anyway, Toy Story is represented by Buzz Lightyear, Jessie, and Woody. The figures are all pretty cool. I find Woody to be a little bit jarring to look at. There's something quite uncanny about his face, both on the figure and especially in the game. I'm not sure if that's just me being a bit pedantic, but it does look a bit weird. So the playset itself actually comes with Buzz Lightyear and Jessie, and Woody you had to buy separately, and I'm guessing they did this because Woody is the more popular character over Jessie, so they figured, well, people are going to want to spend their money on this. Smart move, Disney, because it probably worked. Now, I found this playset to be a bit of a mixed bag. Graphically, it looks amazing. I like the setting of the alien planet and the toys being on there, but the primary focus of most of this game is base building, and the base building is just kind of boring. You just go around, smash some crates to collect the resources, put up the building, use it once or twice for a couple of missions, and move on. So yeah, it's not an ideal setup for this playset, but the world exploration in this playset makes up for that for sure. There's a lot of very cool platforming, some cool hidden secrets you can find smashing through caves. You have to go and explore the volcano a bit later on with Ham, and that part was just so much more exciting than the rest of the game. It kept me playing for a lot longer afterwards. Most of the plot of the early game is the volcano is going to erupt and you have to keep the alien and their home safe. So when you go to explore this volcano with Ham, it's about to erupt, so you have to stop it from erupting as well as exploring the area. It's all very cool, very frantic, and I was very impressed with what I played. Parts of this playset do feel like they had a bit more work put into them compared to some of the others. It just feels a lot more creative and less safe than the other 5 playsets do. Obviously, the other 5 playsets work within the context of the franchises they're in, and it would have been a bit weird to put the Lone Ranger in space or send Johnny Depp's Captain Jack to, like, hell or something like that. But pretty much all 5 of the other playsets are exactly as you would expect. This playset also features some pretty cool methods of traversing. You can get Bullseye quite early on, and by god is that horse quite fast. He makes platforming much more fun because there's specific segments that you can platform designed to ride Bullseye across. You can also get Buzz Lightyear's jetpack. It's not quite as cool as you'd think. It's very hard to control because you can't go up and down. You can just go at the level you're currently flying at. And if you're landing on a small platform with edges, you're probably going to fall off. But it's still pretty cool to fly around. Now, at the end of the day, if you are a creative person, the main reason you're probably playing any of these playsets is to unlock the stuff to use in the toy box mode. Now, I'm not going to focus too heavily on the toy box mode today, because if you guys want to see more about that, we can cover some of the many Disney Easter eggs and franchises included from the discs and everything else that comes with Toy Box. Anyway, the Toy Story playset is just overall quite a mixed bag. It has some really fun moments, some cool methods of traversal, but the base building kind of lets it down for me. If you're into that kind of thing, that's cool, I'm glad you like it, but for me, I just found it to be quite slow and very repetitive because you have to just do the same thing to unlock all the buildings. Literally, collect some boxes, open them, build the building, put some more floor down, collect some more boxes, build the next building. It's all very repetitive, and I don't know, it wasn't for me. Anyway, so that's our final playset, but now let's take a look at the additional characters in the game that do not have playsets. Some of these additional characters do have adventures within Disney Infinity, which are like small levels focused on this specific character's franchise. Now, the PC version has some of these cut out, but we still have ones with Jack Skellington from The Nightmare Before Christmas. There's a Wreck-It Ralph one as well, which is pretty cool. But anyway, I'm just going to go through each of the characters. So the first character I looked at was the Pumpkin King himself, Jack Skellington. Now, I'm a huge fan of the Nightmare Before Christmas film and just everything about it, so it's really cool to see him included in a Disney Infinity game, although it is a shame we didn't get a fully fledged world. However, I can forgive them because we do get that in Kingdom Hearts. Anyway, the figure's pretty cool. He looks very cool in-game. He doesn't look too disproportionate and doesn't look a bit blocky like some of the other characters do, which is nice. Anyway, so next up we have Sorcerer Mickey. Now, in the opening tutorial, you do get to very briefly play as Sorcerer Mickey, kind of, but it's very nice to actually properly get to do this. The figure is very nice, and if you're a big fan of Fantasia, it's a very cool collectible to have. I do physically have one myself, but I do really want to get the crystallized one as well. In the game, I think Mickey is actually a little bit too small. Like, I know he's a mouse, but he's never really shown as being tiny in many animations or films, but in this game particularly, he is very small. In fact, he's like the same height as Phineas from Phineas and Ferb, and Phineas is a small boy, so make that make sense. He has a very cool little moveset featuring fireworks and the brooms from Fantasia, which is pretty cool. But again, a lot of these characters, it's just a shame they didn't have their own fully fledged worlds. But I understand why the worlds that got chosen did, because they were all quite big at the time of the game coming out. Okay, so next up we have Rapunzel from Tangled. Now this is a film that I'm surprised didn't get its own world, because it was quite big around the time when Disney Infinity came out, and you very easily could have had figures for Flynn Rider as well. But I am grateful we got some kind of representation. Now it's very cool that Mandy Moore actually voices Rapunzel in this game like she did in the film, which I think is always a nice touch when you can actually hear the original voice actor in the game. Anyway, as you probably could have guessed if you've seen Tangled, her moveset revolves around a frying pan. And there's nothing wrong with that because the frying pan is iconic. But there's not really much else to say about her because there's no challenge for her, she just is kind of in the game. The character model's cool, the figure's cool, not really much else to say. So next up we have Anna and Elsa from Frozen. Now I have to say I was quite surprised initially that Frozen didn't get its own playset, but then I remembered that Frozen didn't actually come out until about 4 months after the original Disney Infinity, so I guess that makes sense, and with Disney Infinity 2.0 being solely focused on Marvel superheroes, I guess that's why we never got a Frozen playset. Now, both the original voice actors come back to voice their characters respectively, so you have Kristen Bell voicing Anna and Idina Menzel voicing Elsa, which is pretty cool. Anyway, Elsa's moveset revolves around using ice, because of course it does, that would make so much sense, and Anna has a grappling hook. I don't really remember Frozen, but I don't remember having a grappling hook in it either, so I don't know. Anyway, both the figures are pretty cool if you're into Frozen, and the character models suit the game pretty nicely. Anyway, so next up we get one of my personal favourite additions to the whole of Disney Infinity, and that is Perry the motherfucking platypus. What an absolute legend. God, I wish we got a Phineas and Ferb playset. That could have been so cool. Half of it focusing on Phineas and Ferb building absolutely ridiculous stuff, and the other half being Perry's Asian escapades. Perry's moveset pretty much relies on him throwing his hat, which is quite funny because every time you throw it, it doesn't come back to you. A new one just spawns straight on his head. Anyway, it's a very cool figure, a very cool character model. I rate it. So I just want to say as well, Ferb was actually at one point meant to be in the game as a playable character. There's actually trailers that were shown off that had Ferb in the footage, and he has been found in the game's files, and you can kind of play as him, but you can't really do anything. So I guess they just cut him because Ferb doesn't really speak much in the show, and I guess there'd be less interest in having him as a character. Personally, I strongly disagree, but that's up to Disney. Okay, so next up we have, oh my god, why does he look like that? Yes, we have Phineas. Jesus Christ. The model for this character is just hilarious. I don't know if it was done intentionally or not, or if someone finished that and said, yes, this is the one, but my god. Anyway, Phineas's moveset doesn't really have any proper attacks. He can charge and he has a baseball launcher gun, and that's it. I mean, he's not exactly known for being a violent child, so I'm not surprised. The figure itself is pretty cool, but the character model, I just have to say, is hilarious. I know it's not intentionally funny, but the eyes, oh my god, the eyes. So next up we have Vanellope von Schweetz and Wreck-It Ralph. Now Vanellope is pretty cool because she keeps her glitchy persona in the game for her movement and attacks, which is done really well, and Wreck-It Ralph is fine. He's not voiced by his original voice actor, so it sounds a bit jarring when he speaks, but as a character and a model, he's also pretty cool. Ralph's attacks are his standard I'm gonna wreck it and charge and punch the ground, and he can also throw these cherry bombs which have a very cool 16-bit era explosion when they land. That is a very nice touch, I have to say. And like I mentioned previously, there is an adventure for Wreck-It Ralph in the game. And that takes us to the end of the additional characters in Disney Infinity. Now, I did mention briefly there are some additional characters that are just crystal variants of their already original models, and there are a few of these, they are pretty cool, but I'm not going to talk about these today because I'm just talking about the actual playsets and characters. Disney Infinity overall has just really reminded me of a much simpler time where games didn't have to be hyper-realistic and absolutely enormous, they could just be fun and colourful. Yes, this game is shockingly easy, but you aren't playing it really for the difficulty, you're playing it for the fun of having these Disney characters. And for me, I was playing it to play with a friend or with my sibling. It's all just for fun. And really, this game was built off of the toy box from Toy Story 3, so the main focus of Disney Infinity is the toy box, it's not on the playsets. Anyway, that's all I have time for today. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe, and tap the bell for notifications. If you want to see more Disney Infinity content, let me know in the comments down below what you want to see. I'm more than happy to cover all of Disney 2.0 and 3.0 and their playsets and characters as well. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in next week's video. Bye bye.